Hello, anthropologists. So, you've been told, never discuss religion and politics, right? Well, I've made my living discussing both. Turns out, if you're actually nice to people and don't yell, they're great things to discuss. Anyway, this week's lecture is about religion. And the definition is a system of ideas and rules for behavior based on supernatural explanations. Of course, you know there's so much more to it than that, but that's the simple. So, legal systems have their basis in religious systems. So secular governments that have no basis in religion, the idea for those rules comes from religion. So a legal system is a set of rules governing behavior of individuals and institutions within a society. When everybody's all the same faith, you can use that faith's rules to govern your society. But in a multicultural society, that faith-based system isn't going to work. Oh, and I like this stele, this stone sculpture here. It's the sun god handing King Hammurabi the code. The Hammurabi's code is the first codified legal system. And it kind of looks like a king and his servant, when in fact it's the sun god and his servant the king. So I just think this is really neat. Religion has a biological basis. Our big brains, its complex functions, we want to make sense of the world. Our cats and dogs, the birds that fly, they don't necessarily need to make sense of everything, categorize everything, they just go about, live their lives. Our brain, this huge neocortex we had that helps us solve puzzles and plan, and that makes us want to try to understand our universe. So religion is a human universal because we all try to order our worlds in some way. Okay, and we think that it predates us here. Jane Goodall observed male chimps doing this rain display. They would go up the mountain, like beat their chest and yell at the storm, and then they'd roll down and do it again. And what she was seeing, it was a reaction to the anxiety by the frightening thunder. And they were, I guess, hoping to influence nature. So they're trying to explain their world the best they can. And chimps, like us, have a developed neocortex. It's just not nearly as huge. So maybe they understand less. And we also know that Neanderthals had some ritual for death. So they'd put ochre and flowers into actual created graves for their dead. So not sure if it's their way of saying goodbye or helping them to then into a better afterlife, but they were performing some kind of ritual. So something beyond the concrete, something that they couldn't see, they were trying to work with. And you all know we try to explain stuff around us. Natural phenomena we can understand. We know why thunder and lightning happen. We know condensation creates rain. So we can explain that with natural answers. But things like death or why bad things happen, we don't have nice, easy explanations. So we have to create these explanations for ourselves. Victor Turner, he wrote The Ritual Process. He's an expert on rituals. He defined the ritual is a stereotyped sequence of activities performed in a sequestered place and designed to influence preternatural entities or forces on behalf of the actor's goals and interests. So for two examples, the Catholics, when they walk into the church, they'll put their hand in the holy water and they'll do the sign of the cross. And then as they walk to their pew, they genuflect, which is a little knee dip before they walk and sit into their pew in honor of the cross that's carved on the pew to honor their Lord. And when a Jew walks into their home or the home of another Jew, on the door frame is a little scroll in a glass or metal case called a mezuzah. And it's a reminder of one's faith. So Victor Turner here says that it's intended to influence preternatural entities. But in this case, reminder of the faith is influencing the faithful. So I have quibbles with Victor Turner here, but in all, it's that stereotyped sequence of activities is the performance of one's faith. Oh, and by the way, I just absolutely love this picture with an old faith with modern AV equipment, because religions don't stay still. They always change to meet the needs of their practitioners. Okay, so religion's a symbolic interpretation of life, and it provides motives for human actions. Why am I here? What's my purpose in life? What comes next? Here's another one of those really tough definitions. I'm going to give you a second to think about it after I've said it. Religion is psychologically reassuring and socially supportive by providing validations for existence, motive for human actions, and a sanction for orderly human relations. As I said, that's pretty dense. So, psychologically reassuring. Religion comforts us. It's socially supportive and validates our existence. So, my purpose in life is to be a good member of this community, of this society, or a faithful servant of my God. It provides motives for human actions, and it sanctions orderly human relations. It says who you can marry, who you shouldn't marry, how you should respond to people, what you should do when you're angry with them. So religion gives us a guideline for how to act with others. Remember, law is the same for keeping order that religion is in larger secular societies. So in 54, Hobel defined law as a social norm is legal if its neglect or infraction is regularly met in threat or fact by the application of physical force by an individual or group possessing the socially recognized privilege of so acting. Yes, that's a lot of painful words. So, a societal norm is legal if its neglect or infraction is regularly met in threat or fact by application of physical force by an individual or group possessing the socially recognized privilege of so acting. A societal norm is legal. Okay, so that means its law is codified, it's written, it's set down. So can you think of a law that if you neglect it, you're going to be in trouble? Do I hear any young men saying if they neglect to register for selective service, they're in trouble? Or if they neglect to pay taxes, we'd all get in trouble. So those are laws that you have to actually do a thing. If infraction laws, running a stoplight, committing murder, any laws where they say don't do this, and if you do it, you get in trouble, that's an infraction. So it's met in threat or fact by the application of force. So thinking about this law, the infraction of this law, the law says that if you see a red light, you stop. If you run the red light, are you going to be punished? Odds are very, very high. If you run the red light, no one's going to do anything to you. You're fine. People will beep at you, but that's something you can brush off. We stop because there's a possibility that we could be punished. So laws can't arrest you every time you do something wrong. You're not going to get penalized for it. But that threat is what keeps us in check. Now, going on. The individual or group possessing the socially recognized privilege of so acting. What individual or group is allowed to punish us? I know some of you said the police. Usually they're not allowed to punish us. They can issue citations so that they have the right to, but if we commit a big crime, it's not the police that are supposed to punish. That's the job of the jury or the judge, depending on the legal system you're working under. Okay, religions, or legal systems that derive from the idea of religions, are our way of making our worldview real. They provide us with a means of communicating our assumptions about the world. It gives us a way to say what we value, what we despise, and lets us sum it up really easy. Religions give us a medium for formulating values of behavior that correspond to our worldview. So imagine that aliens from outer space come down and land on your yard. If you're from a place where your faith says, welcome the immigrant, welcome strangers, you're going to tend to think, okay, maybe these people aren't so bad. If the same space aliens landed in your yard, but you're from a religion that says strangers are dangerous, build up your walls and protect yourself, you're probably going to have a negative reaction and react with violence. So our worldview helps shape how we're going to deal with new situations. So our faith and our laws cannot make rules for everything, but the stories we tell, like Noah and the Ark, or just all the stories we've been given, tell us how to respond to new situations because, well, shoot, what would Noah do in this situation, in an awful situation? So getting these stories help us formulate what to do with new things. It provides a framework for putting those values into action in our everyday lives and in our dealings with one another. And most importantly, they're a way of packaging our worldview for future generations. Here's a book with my values in it. Here are the stories of my people for thousands of years. This is how to act with new things. And every culture has these stories. Even if they're not written, every culture has a rich oral history that they pass on these templates for behavior. So look at this beautiful Botticelli painting, by the way, completely non sequitur. Do you see what Madonna's reading to her son? Yeah. The book of how he's killed. I don't know. I think he's a little young to see that. Okay, back to the topic. So religions vary greatly from society to society, but the one trait they all have in common is some kind of explanation for the supernatural. And as I said before, belief in the supernatural is universal. Religion itself is a cultural universal. What we get depends on the culture we're in, but every culture has a faith. And when you're telling me atheists don't have a faith, they do have a faith in that there's nothing. Richard Dawkins is going to write me a nasty letter if he ever sees this, but atheism also is a faith. So, as I said, universal, but every society explains phenomena differently. Some use more science than others. Some use more mystical explanations than others, even for the science. But there always is some kind of supernatural explanatory system for things. Oh, and this image, I saw it in a museum when I was little. It's called The Nightmare. Isn't it gorgeous? Okay. People need to feel control over facets of their world, so they invoke supernatural for explanations. And the more dangerous or precarious your life is, as a community, the more likely you are to rely on the supernatural. Any athletes? Athletes tend to be very, very superstitious. You don't change your socks for 10 games, or you always wear your shirt inside out underneath your jersey, because they can't control it. In equally matched groups, it does tend to be luck. But imagine you're a fisherman in the North Sea. Your life is very dangerous a lot of the time. So they tend to have a lot of rituals to keep them safe because it's the only thing they have. They did everything right. They made sure their ropes are good, their decks are clear, but it relies on luck or the goodness of God, in their opinion. So, keeping these rituals is a way to keep one safe. Okay, many cultures deal with death by believing in an afterlife. The body or some essence of the deceased goes back to some region from which it came, or spends time with their family as ghosts. A lot of societies believe in ghosts. All cultures have rituals to ensure the deceased gets to their final destination, and to do that, they also have prescriptions on how to live during life to make sure that they get to the right destination. And these help provide motivations for human actions. It helps sanction orderly human relationships. Don't kill your neighbor. Don't covet thy neighbor's ass. Those general kind of things. Living right here shows that you'll live right in the afterlife. You'll get to the right afterlife. But once again, religions vary around the world. And of course, just like religions vary, the type of supernatural beings one encounters when they speak with other cultures varies. So, when we were all hunter-gatherers before 12,000 years ago, give or take, as far as we know, everybody was polytheistic. Polytheism means you believe in multiple supernatural beings. So, this isn't the hierarchical polytheism where there's a king god and a bunch of minion gods. In foraging societies, the sun, the river, the trees, the caribou, all have spirits, all have something in them, their own energy. And you don't want to piss off any of it. So if you live in a nice, hospitable place, the gods around you are pretty chill. If you live in a harsh environment, the spirits, you don't want to piss off the spirits of the prey animals you're killing. So you'll do rituals to honor the spirit of that animal you've killed, so its spirit doesn't come harm you and your family later. So these elements, they're in the environment and they affect people on a personal level. Humans in these societies are one of many natural phenomena. So, like the political systems that lack formal leadership, the supernatural reflects that societal organization where everybody's or everything's pretty equal, having different powers. You know, humans have the powers of tools and intelligence and talking. The volcano has the power to melt you into little itty bitty pieces. So, you honor everything. And there's a scriptural term, as it is in heaven, so will it be below. But actually, from what we see as anthropologists, as on earth it is in heaven. So whatever political system a community has, that's what you're going to see in their belief about the supernatural. Monotheistic systems and hierarchical polytheistic systems are found in groups that have gained distinct control over their habitats, so agricultural communities. They have hierarchical political systems. We have bureaucrats, we have politicians, we have maybe dukes and princes and kings. And that formal leadership is reflected in the supernatural. Anybody see a Disney movie? You might have seen some hierarchical polytheistic systems, or read Rick Riordan. So the Greeks, the Romans, the Norse, all hierarchical polytheistic systems. Like hierarchical polytheism, Christianity does have a leader god, but it's not a true monotheistic religion. God is a Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and Mary is treated as a deity in Catholic practice. She intervenes on behalf of the parishioner to her son. And of course, there's seraphim and cherubim and all the hosts, all the heavenly hosts. Judaism is closer to a true monotheistic religion, in which there's no saints, but there still are angels, which are supernatural beings. So according to anthropology, that is another supernatural being. While not a god, it is a supernatural being. Okay, so the nature of the supernatural beings differ among human religions. And I need you guys to know that we have a bunch of these. So I know plenty of people from the monotheistic religions that also believe that their loved ones still watch over them in the form of angels. And also, I know a lot of people that believe in ghosts. Those are supernatural beings. So there's three kinds of supernatural beings, really. The animists believe in spirits and forces within the natural world. So healing crystals, mystical animals, special places, or objects like the Spirit of Liberty resides in this bell we have in Pennsylvania. And there's ancestors and ghosts, which are supernatural beings of human origin. And then, like the God of the Abrahamic religions, supernatural beings of non-human origin. These beings created themselves and then made the world with all its creatures. So animism refers to forces in a person, animal, place, non-living thing, lucky rabbit's feet, except for that poor rabbit. You get the general idea. Totemism is similar to animism, except instead of just the object, like the tree, having this energy or spirit within it, totemists believe in a kinship or mystical relationship with that spiritual being. So you hear people say, my totem animal is this or such. In a lot of faiths, there's a lot of cultures where they believe that they have this totem as part of their lineage. So I'm descended of the bear, or I'm descended of the lake, if I'm in one of those clans. They're not worshipped like gods, but that spirit is thought to bond all those members of that clan into one kind of family with this core trait that they all have. So supernatural beings of human origin, ghosts, spirits of the dead. So we talked about pastoralist communities. in which they're very culturally conservative because the spirits of their grandfather and their great-grandfather are there watching them. You're not going to make as many rash decisions if you know the spirits of your dead ancestors are there judging you. So the spirits are important here in cultures where their kinship group is their major social and political decision-making units. There's a culture in New Guinea that's really interesting in that they used to engage in intertribal warfare before it was made illegal. So they would go to war, but they would fight until one person died. And then the conflict would stop and they'd all go home and they'd mourn their dead, they'd get ready for the next battle. Well, the Dani had ghosts haunting them. And it was a ghost of the dead person that was killed in that battle. But you'd assume it would be revenge. I'm really angry you killed me. Why'd you do this? And I'm going to punish you. But that's not how their ghost worked. Their ghost would haunt their own family. It's like, dude, I'm dead. You need to avenge my death. And so they'd go back to war and make sure to kill a member of the rival clan or tribe. And then that group's ghost would haunt them until they went back to war. So the spirits of their dead were very much a part of their lives. So, I told you guys, a lot of societies believe in both a supreme leader god and angels and spirits of their own dead and animism. So cultures have a combination of supernatural types. And a lot of times these supernatural beings or spirits have personalities. Benevolent, malevolent, mischievous. You'll know about the mischievous Loki as a trickster god, or a Nazi as a trickster god. So these gods, these supernatural beings, actually kind of correlate to one's environment. So you live in a nice, comfortable world, you'll have trickster gods, but the gods in general aren't angry all the time. But think about the Puritans and their sinners in the hands of an angry God speech. Think about New England winters, and if you're not working hard, any idle time could mean the death of your family if you don't plant enough food or the winters are too harsh. So God was quick to anger, quick to punish, and the world was hostile. The supernatural beings were hostile. And it's reflected, well, it reflects their environment, and then their scriptures, their sermons, everything reflects that delicate balance where you have to act right or you and your community could die. And of course, the last kind of supernatural being is supernatural beings of non-human origin, which create themselves and make everything. So here's a carving of Prometheus as they're making humanity while Athena's there looking on. Prometheus got punished by the gods. They didn't like this whole thing because he wanted to be nice to them. That's a whole nother story. But it's a story that reflects the way the Romans were thinking about the world. It was a story about what happens if you disobey rules. So they're passing on how to behave right, or how to misbehave, because he was the one who created us. Supernatural forces also are reflected in child-rearing habits. If your gods are gentle and nice, you're going to be nicer to your kids while you're potty training. So more harsh environments, more angry gods means you're going to be more strict because, heck, You don't want your kid to accidentally go to the wrong afterlife, so parents have to be respected and feared, just like the parents have to respect and fear the God. Okay, and now for something slightly different. I love this picture down here. This is Egyptian, this is Anubis, and when you get to the afterlife, he'll weigh your heart against a feather, and if your heart is heavier than the feather, you go to the bad afterlife. If your heart is light, not guilty, you'll go to the better afterlife. Okay, so like the many supernatural beings, there's also supernatural mediators in earthly form. So in complex societies, agricultural societies, there are priests. They are full-time religious specialists. So we're going to talk about priests as full-time labor specialists. This is in a society where there's social stratification, division of labor, where there's farmers making food, and then they pay taxes to feed the priest class, the soldier class. And in horticultural societies and foraging societies, there's shaman. Because nobody has full-time jobs in these societies. These shaman are part-time. Priests train. They have knowledge of the supernatural power. They know how to intercede and help people. But shaman are called by the supernatural to perform magical acts. They have real power. Oh, and by the way, this is good King Wenceslas being taken around. He's taken out for parades, and the bones of the saints can help heal people. So rules for human behavior come directly from the supernatural in most cases. We've secularized it, and we take that out a lot. But the supernatural is used to maintain order and power, and in complex societies, those kings are put in place by divine right, by divine authority. And so it was when the god chose the king or the queen or the emperor, and the emperor has the blessing of the Pope, how are you going to defy your liege when by defying the king you're defying God? So religions have been often used as a way to maintain this hierarchy, this wealth and power difference. It was used in the American South during slavery. By obeying a master on earth, you're going to get to heaven and be free and live alongside Jesus. So, yeah, religion has been used as a tool of the powerful over the oppressed. So, priests in a lot of cultures have possessed political power. In some cultures, the political and the priest class were the same. So there's difference among the religious specialists, as I mentioned. Shaman are part-time. They live in societies where there isn't full-time jobs. So shaman are part-time, sometimes they hunt, sometimes they fish. And of course, they're called on to heal people, to help. And they're always the religious specialist of the community, but they only have to work as a religious leader part of the time. So here's your definitions. Shaman are part-time, supernaturally chosen by the supernatural. They have powers of their own. They can manipulate forces. They can channel the various spirits or gods through them. Priests are trained religious specialists who can interpret the supernatural. They petition on people's behalves. They don't have power in themselves. Okay, and now for my favorite parts. Contacting the supernatural varies across cultures. Sometimes prayer can occur alone or in congregations. It can be solitary, it can be groups. It could be just talking to the supernatural, or it has recitations of prescribed words. Sometimes contacting the supernatural involves eating. Some of you may be familiar with communion, in which the wafer of bread is transubstantiated into the body of Christ, and the wine is transubstantiated into the blood of Christ, where it's symbolic cannibalism. Sometimes it involves sacrifice, burning of incense, killing an animal, or the sacrifice could be personal, in which during Lent, Christians don't eat a particular type of food. Or during Ramadan, where the faithful don't eat from sun up to sundown for that whole month. And of course, choose at the Sabbath. And then they engage in the Sabbath meal together. Okay, so ways of sensing the divine: music, noise, dance, art, sacred symbols. Drawing of sacred symbols with sand on the ground is a ritual. And of course, drugs. I'm sure you've seen videos or movies where they take peyote and enter visions. So drugs, fasting, self-mutilation, walking on fire, beating oneself with handheld whips, self-flagellation. All these help people sense the divine. And I'm going to link to a video. These are Sufi mystics. It's a branch of Islam that's not actually accepted by Sunni or Shia Muslims. And this is Sufi, and they spin one hand up, one hand down, head tipped, and they spin in order to contact the supernatural, to be in communion with their God. I will try to link to some videos on religions that I think will help you guys understand. So here's a summary. Like many other aspects of human culture, religion seems to have a biological basis. Every culture has a belief system that fits their worldview. And even though faiths are universal, how they're practiced varies from culture to culture, as you know. There's three main functions of religion. They codify, they put into writing or into formal rules our guidelines for behavior. They pass down the worldview to future generations, and they help followers deal with the unknown. Religion mirrors the subsistence pattern and the system of leadership of a particular community. The complexity of the society determines the role of religious specialists. So next week we're going to be specifically looking at two different Christian religions and comparing them and their community's needs. So thank you.